In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Today's guest has graced some of the most renowned stages in the world, from Lincoln Center in New York to opera houses across Europe and Asia. International opera singer Daniel Hendrick is known not only for his extraordinary voice, once praised by the New York Times as a divine gift, but also for the resilience and faith that carried him through some of life's most crushing setbacks. In his early 20s, at the height of promise, Daniel suddenly lost his voice during a competition in Milan. What followed was a years-long struggle marked by heartbreak, betrayal, and uncertainty. Yet through unwavering faith, self-determination, and what he describes as divine intervention, Daniel reclaimed both his voice and his calling. Now he's telling his story in a powerful new memoir, Know You Know, a raw and inspiring reflection on failure, faith, and the courage to rise again. Daniel, welcome to the conversation. Great to see you.
Wow, thank you, my friend. That sounds like a Rocky Balboa introduction there.
Have you always enjoyed singing?
Oh, yeah. My first solo was 2 years old singing Jesus Loves Me in church. So I grew up the youngest of 5 kids, all of who were singing before me in church and school.
And when did you decide that you wanted to make it a profession?
That is a very big part of the book, that story. I was either 15 or almost 16, and my big sister asked me to sing at her wedding the Lord's Prayer. And my father told me, go into the den and pick up this album with a guy named Mario Lanza and listen to the record with the Lord's Prayer. Up until that point, I had never heard an opera singer before, just gospel and church music. And I picked up that recording of Lanza singing the Lord's Prayer, and I had what people today would describe as an outer body experience. And I was floating above the room, and I listened to this, and then after that song, I noticed there were all of these other songs in foreign languages. And I didn't know what it was. And it was the opera Pagliacci, Rigoletto, Carmen, Tosca. And I just was entranced by this and felt like in some way that his voice was giving me a conduit to God, one that I had never felt in that way before. And after a day or so listening to that constantly, I went back to my dad and I said, Dad, what is this stuff in foreign languages? And he said, that's opera, son. And mind you, my dad was a steel worker, right? And I said, Dad, I want to be an opera singer. And 2 weeks later, he has me in voice lessons 5 days a week.
Wow. That in itself, to me, is an incredible miracle that your dad could think beyond his own self-imposed limitations to see a future for you that maybe he couldn't imagine for himself.
Yes, exactly that. And for him to take the money out of his pocket that he didn't really have to pay for lessons for me was an incredible gift.
When was it that you realized that you had something special in that voice?
In that moment, when I had this experience with Mario Lanza, I just had a knowingness in my heart and soul that was me. I had that same thing.
They say that we all have a purpose in life. We come to earth not knowing what that is, and then we have to figure out what it is. Was that the moment that you found yours?
Yes, absolutely. And thus the title of the book again. And that, maybe that gift, I guess you might call it, or that consciousness, is hard for people to grab onto in general in society. But it was a gift to me. And that same principle, it's like it opened a realm of consciousness between normal thinking, the way we are, and what's on the other side. similar to what people describe with the near-death experience when they're on the other side and they're in the midst of just pure love. In that place, there's a word for it. It's nous, the new. It's like a transition between this world and the next. But in that place is where I got this information. That was who I am. And that was what I was going to do. It's hard to explain.
The analogy that I thought of as I was preparing for this conversation was so many of us little boys start out in little league and we dream of someday making it to the majors.
Yeah.
Take me through that process for you with singing. What did you do to become good?
Yeah, to preface that, I too, as a little boy, played baseball my whole life and grew up always admiring Hank Aaron, who later in my life I would meet. But anyhow, I had that desire to want to be a pro baseball player, but I surely did not have that knowingness. So when I had this spiritual experience, it's like a door of consciousness opened that I had never felt in that way before. And I know this is going to sound weird, but it felt like it changed my DNA. It felt like it was a gift that came from the other side, and it just planted itself in my soul. And it was unwavering, the knowledge. Even years later, when I lost my voice and had to come back, and all of the voices of doubt were coming at me from all different directions, I can honestly say I never had a doubt that I would get it back, even though I was extremely frustrated.
Being good at something requires a ton of work. How did you find the discipline as such a young man to work that hard?
Yeah, that's so funny you asked that, because people say, oh my God, you're an opera singer. You must be super disciplined. And I'm like, no, that's not my character. But when you love something and you're doing it because you love it and you're intrigued by it, then it's no longer discipline. It's passion. And I have worked with a lot of singers from around the world, and certain cultures teach the singers that it's all about discipline. But then what ends up happening, they get locked up inside because they're forcing it at a spiritual plane instead of letting it flow. And for me, the experience is, of course, there are times when you know, okay, I didn't practice, I have to do it. The button turns very quickly and you're passionate about what you're doing. But the other side of discipline is that it can lead you to be restrictive.
You lose the play.
You lose the play and the spontaneity of it all. And it's an art. You have to, it isn't just training your voice, it's training your soul, your heart, your emotions, your mind. All of that has to come together in a moment that on stage that you don't have to think about it anymore. Much like a baseball player, when you get up to bat, if you're thinking about where are my feet, where are my hips, where are my shoulders, it's too late.
Take us back to the first time you stepped onto a fairly large stage with a full house, and we're looking out at those people and the orchestra started to play. What was going on inside your head and heart at that moment?
Yeah, that was a fun one. I was 18 years old and I got selected to go on tour to Japan and Korea and ultimately Hawaii with a group called the Musical Americans. And I had a solo in that, actually a duet from the musical West Side Story, and we sang Tonight. And I went on stage after stage in Japan with big audiences and fans. At that time in Japan, they loved the Broadway music. So we were being treated like Michael Jackson over there. It was incredible. But when I first walked onto that stage and sang with them, all of my listening to Mario Lanza and my envisioning myself do it just gave me this sense of authenticity. Even though I was younger than most of the kids on the tour, and I was very immature at that age, but I had that seed that was so deep within me that I just felt thank you, God. I'm where I belong. It was beautiful.
The book is Know You Know, written by our special guest, Daniel Hendrick. You can learn more about him at danielhendrick.com. You and I share the touring musician experience in common. How do you keep that energy at a performance level where the magic happens night after night?
That's a good question. It's really the same. It's the same answer because you probably performed several nights in a row, right?
Every night for summer. Yeah, just about.
Yeah. When you're an opera singer, you do one night and then you have a couple of days off and then you do another night. So that helps that equation tremendously. But when you're singing the leading role, like, for instance, La Bohème or Tosca, that's very taxing because it's basically 2 hours of singing on stage. And you're doing it without a microphone. But the answer to your question directly is, once again, it wasn't work. It was this force of the new, as I call it, NOUS, that place in between. It like feeds you. It like gives you energy. It gives you substance to be able to deliver that which you need to give to the audience. Some people describe it as letting God sing through you or letting the universe sing through you. And the more you do that, the more you let go and just find that current. It's like Bruce Lee talked about, the chi, the life force of energy. When you relinquish your thought about technique and self, and you abandon self to that energetic force, it's just easy.
And then came that moment where you suddenly lost your instrument.
Yeah, I was in Italy. My mentor at the time was Giuseppe Di Stefano, who was the idol of Luciano Pavarotti. And he took me under his wing, and I was going to be the next sensation. And he took me to Italy for the Caruso competition. But that year, I had just gotten married and had a new son and had an adopted son who was 4 years old and had strep almost that whole year off and on. And the doctors could not figure out what the heck was going on. So I was on antibiotic, off antibiotic. They were struggling and I was struggling because I had this opportunity of a lifetime. I left for Italy thinking I was cleared up and the voice was fine. And I get there, and the very first day I go to Di Stefano's apartment and sing. And he said, "What's that all about?" And my coach at the time, John Dare, was there. And he said, "It's probably the flight. Let's let him rest." So come back the next day, same thing. Ended up, they take me to a doctor. Of course, what do I have? Strep. They advanced me to the finals without ever singing a note, which was against the regulations. But I kept trying with all my might to get it back. I'm doubling up on the antibiotic, on steroids, everything. I could not sing, and I had to walk out on stage and apologize to the audience. And at that moment, I felt the abandonment from my mentor at that point, and left the stage literally contemplating killing myself because that's what I had worked for my whole life.
The world is like that, isn't it? We are valued to the extent that we can add value or joy to others. What did you do then?
Here is the beginning of the new journey of that consciousness I was talking about, even in desperation. And I know this is going to sound to some like I was dreaming or hallucinating, but it is absolutely real. So I'm on the plane going home back to San Diego, and I'm sitting in the row with the emergency door exit. And in flight, I keep looking at it, and I keep imagining myself opening the door and jumping out of the plane. But the only thing that prevented me from doing that was that I knew that I would harm other people. So I nixed that idea. And I just started meditating and saying, God, I need help. I don't know what's going on here with my voice and what just happened to me. Devastated. Then what sounded like a person one row over yelling, and was a male voice, a baritone voice, Charlotte Aldrich. And I look around to see what was that. I had never heard this name in my whole life. A few minutes later, Charlotte Aldrich. What the heck? And so there was a gentleman sitting across from me and I said, sir, did you hear that? What? Somebody yelled Charlotte Aldrich. And he said, I didn't hear anything. Then one more time, Charlotte Aldrich. Okay, I'm going crazy, but I heard the voice out loud. It wasn't in my head. So then I get home. I am with some friends of mine in San Diego. They were like parents to me, Jackie and Frank Snow, and my wife at the time. And I told them this story, and each of them had a different take on what it was. Jackie said, that's God speaking to you. 2 days later, we went to the restaurant that I had been singing at in San Diego, an Italian restaurant, and I heard this tenor by the name of Glenn DeBrail singing. And before I had heard Glenn about a year before it, he was nothing spectacular. But now Glenn is singing Nessun Dorma, and it's spectacular at an international level. And after he's done with his set, he comes over to the table and says, hey, Daddy, how did the competition go? And I told him I lost my voice. I got sick. And I said, but Glenn, you sound fantastic. What the heck happened to you? And he said, Charlotte Aldrich, I've been studying with. Everybody at the table had this look of shock on their face. They could not believe what just happened.
So you contacted Charlotte Aldrich.
You think?
And
you think?
What happened? What did she do?
So after I first thanked for her and she heard the problem and she told me, quote, I think you're here for more than just singing, young man. Meaning that there was some spiritual component that I needed to learn. And so she guided me through that whole thing about why did I get strep, the components of being married for the first time, having a new baby, having an adopted son, and all of the kind of psychological parts that influenced what happened to me. And so then a couple of years with Charlotte, and I realized technically I had reached what she could give me, but I still had not gotten my voice back. So one day playing with my dog, the dog was growling and I growled back and I literally felt a shock from my head to my vocal cords. Like a shock when you rub the carpet in socks and you touch somebody and you're shocked. It was like that. And so then I felt that growl, and I started playing with it. And then I went to some teachers, other teachers locally, and showed them what I was playing with. They said, no, never do that, never do that. So then I started playing with animal sounds and mimicking animal sounds and mimicking fire trucks, things that were not singing. And I noticed it was bringing my voice back. It was coming back. So previous to that, I had also gone to doctors all over the country to try to fix what was wrong with me after the strep, and no one could figure out why. Now we know it's a condition called spasmodic dysphonia, when you lose the connection from your brain to your vocal cords. And this happens with athletes too. So anyhow, since the doctors couldn't figure it out, I had to figure it out. And this was part of that journey with the divine guiding me. And at the same time, I started having dreams from Mario Lanza that he was coming to me, going to tell me the secret to singing. So all of these forces from the other side were helping me along to finally get my voice back.
And of course, there were other things that were going on in your life at that time, because you weren't the superstar that you once were, that you had to navigate to. How did you get through all of that?
When we did sports my whole life, sports in church growing up. And my father had this phrase when we were pitching and he would see us getting a little emotional or upset out there. And he would say, "Cold and deliberate, son, cold and deliberate." And that concept always stuck with me, that you build, in a way, a skin around you that does not allow the other voices outside of you to stop you from achieving your goal. And one great example was, we were in a church in San Diego that we really loved the minister, loved the whole thing. 2 years after losing my voice, the minister wanted to meet with me along with the head deacon, who just happened to be a rear admiral in the Navy. Okay. And I think, okay, maybe they're going to throw me a bone here and offer me a job as a choir director or something at the church until I get my voice back. So they came. Basically, the minister said, "Daniel, it's time for you to face reality. It's obvious God's plan is taking you in a different direction, and you need to hear that call." And I'm like, wow, that's not what I was expecting. So I said to the pastor, "There's a verse in the Bible that says, 'Blessed is he who believes and has not seen.'" And I said, just because you haven't seen my progress doesn't mean that I am not still believing in what the divine has given me, what God gave. I am going to be an international opera singer. And he said, "That's so irresponsible because your kids are not having the shoes that they want." And I'm like, you know what? My kids don't have to have Jordans. They're doing just fine. So then the rear admiral chimes in. And this is in the book. And he said, and mind you, I'm like 26 years old at this point. He says, "Son, I know leadership. Let me tell you about leadership. I have trained thousands of men about leadership. And what you're demonstrating is not leadership. You're not showing your family what leadership is." And I said, "General or Admiral, with all due respect, I'm telling you, you don't know what leadership is. Leadership is telling your children that no matter what the world tells you, when you have a knowingness in your soul, that you press forward until you see it to fruition." And I said, "Admiral, have there been good presidents?" "Yeah." "Have there been bad?" And he laughs. "Oh, of course." "Are there good and bad doctors?" "Yes." "Are there good and bad lawyers?" "Yes." And I said, "Admiral, I have no idea if you are a good admiral. Do not come into my house and do not tell me about leadership. Please get out of my house."
The book is Know You Know, available everywhere. The website is danielhendrick.com. Do you think that those two people who are perceived as the best in their profession, and one being from your church, your faith, were sent there with a message to strengthen your resolve without realizing it?
Yeah, without realizing it, yes, I think so. I think that was a moment in time, a turning point. Because when it's coming from someone of authority, two people, they were both from the church, and you had a sense of love and admiration for them, to be able to stand up with that, that gave me also a sense of, yes, I'm my father's son, and yes, there is a divine purpose to what's happening here. And it shocked me in the moment that I did it, because I did not have like thoughts going through my head saying, I have to say this to these guys. It was from a deep-rooted conviction of knowingness. And I tell my kids to this day, do you know when they're faced with a situation? If go ahead and do it. If you don't know, you better think about it.
So there was never a time throughout all of this when you questioned whether or not you could come back?
No, I always knew I would come back. I just questioned my ability to process it. I questioned my intelligence. I questioned my knowledge about how to do it. All of that was constant, and it was filled with constant trial and error. I would try something and then fail, try something and fail until the barking dog moment. And that began a big change. Finally, I found the teacher that embraced that, along with a lot of other kind of metaphysical concepts that helped me to let go. And as I let go, and she showed me the path, her name was Jane Randolph. And a couple of years with Jane, then she said, I think you're ready. And do you know this agent by the name of Lombardo Associates? And I'm like, I knew them back when I won the Metropolitan Opera audition, so almost 10 years ago. And she called him on the phone, got an audition for me in LA with one of their key agents, and he signed me on the spot.
And then the almost unbelievable story of your return to the stage in Colorado.
Now I have a contract to go sing in Colorado, the Opera La Boheme, up in Keystone, which is, 6,000 or 7,000 feet up. And so I am in Colorado, getting ready the next day to drive up to the opera place in Keystone. And the director and his wife are going to drive me up. And I'm like, well, that's wonderful. But I get a call from my wife at the time, and she said, don't go. I'm like, what? She said, I had this experience, and I'm telling you, your life is in danger. Do not go. And she had never done anything like that before. So I took it to heart, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to meditate on that. I'm going to pray about that. And if I feel that it's okay for me to go, I will. But I'm hearing you. So I did. And of course, the pressure's on me. I have kids at home. I have a contract with the agent. I can't tell them I can't go because my wife had a spiritual experience. So I went, and I'm sitting in the back seat. We're going up the mountain. It starts thundering and raining like terrible. The pressure in the car was palatable. And I'm like, wow, this is intense. And I'm talking to Hugh and Margaret, the directors and wife, as I'm sitting in the back seat. And the rain's coming down so forcefully. And all of a sudden, I hear boom. It feels like a shotgun blast us. And for whatever reason, I fall to the right, but I feel like I'm being hit with shotgun pellets. And all of a sudden I hear, he can't drive, he can't drive. And we both realize that he had been struck in the face and is unconscious by this giant boulder that came through and had landed in between the two seats. So I grabbed the steering wheel. Well, first I grabbed his fingers, which are frozen on the steering wheel, and I peel them off, and I'm steering. And Margaret climbs across the seat with her hands and brakes as we pull to the side of the car. And there we are. I jump out of the car. I go around. Hugh is not breathing. And she said, he's got something in his mouth. He can't breathe. So I reach in, and my hands are very large. I can palm a basketball. And I'm reaching and I'm digging out bone and teeth. It's terrible. And I tell her, I said, Margaret, you have to go in there because your hands are a lot smaller. She does the same. And I put my hands on his chest. And I say, my friend, you've been in an accident. You're not breathing. You have got to take a breath. And then all of a sudden, there it goes. He's breathing. And the ambulance comes. They take him away. And here comes a reporter the next day and knocks on my door. Oh, let me go a little bit before that. So that night, I'm in my hotel room in Keystone, and I am devastated by what happened. I fall asleep finally, and I hear a knock on the door, banging on the door, banging. And I get up, I open the door, and it's the director with an axe in his hand, blood coming down his face, yelling at me, it was supposed to be you, it was supposed to be you. Oh my God, it scared the shit out of me. So there I am. The next morning, I hear another knock on the door, and I'm like, oh, another dream, but I get up, answer it. It's a reporter. So she takes me down to where the car has been taken and asks me about what happened. And I tell her, and she says, "Where were you seated?" "Right there in the middle of the back seat." And she looks at the back seat and she sees this big hole. She said, "What is that?" And I'm like, "What?" "The hole." And she reaches in and grabs the mirror that had been thrust directly at my chest, but I had moved just in the slit of time, and that mirror would have hit me in the chest and clearly killed me. 2 days later, I had to sing the opera La Bohème, and that was a very difficult experience.
But you did it.
But I did it.
And how was it received?
It was received greatly by the audience, and of course they had no idea what I had just gone through. But I did have to have oxygen backstage, not only because of the altitude, but because I just kept hyperventilating from like many panic attacks. But the show must go on. As my dad always said, cold and deliberate. You have to make it happen. And those kinds of events were what just kept propelling me through my whole career. And I know it's hard for people to understand, and they think that maybe it's my imagination, but there are too many documented things like this, for example. And I had even told the director and his wife what had happened with my wife at the time, that she was afraid I was going to be killed. So they knew about it beforehand. So things like that just built a faith in me that there is a force on the other side of this world that is looking out for us. And that's why now we are taking the book to a mini-series, and we're calling it Never Alone.
The book is written by our special guest, Daniel Hendrick. Life is full of twists and turns. We can't escape it. Success is overcoming a series of obstacles. How would you look back over this and explain and advise our listeners about how to get the most out of this short time that we have on earth?
Beautiful question. Yes, I would say at the very least, begin to trust intuition. Lean on that intuition and prove it and practice it and see which kinds of intuition prove themselves to be true and which kind don't come to fruition. And in doing so, you can then start to find life leading you on the path that has your best interest in mind.
What is your purpose today?
My biggest purpose today is to share love, encouragement, and to help everybody else find their path, find that thing that gives them hope, that gives them a sense of belonging in the world.
And how do you define success?
Success is not about money or fame. It's about feeling satisfied within your own heart. And boy, I tell you, living here in Mexico, I can see success in so many ways just by the happiness on the local taco shop or the lady that makes the tortillas. And I see the joy that they're living in. And I'm like, living in the States, I see that frequently there's a struggle of always wanting more, instead of first enjoying and having a heart full of gratitude for what you have. And I think once one lives in a heart of gratitude, you open the door to experience more.
How do we find faith in the face of tremendous fear, obstacles, and uncertainty?
There's a quote in the Bible that says, "Knock and the door shall be open, seek and ye shall find." And whether you're religious or not, but if you had any faith, you just have to ask. You have to reach out. And even if you don't believe that there's a God or that there's a universe of protection, there are always people around you. If we ask the question in our soul, is there somebody around me that can help me? And our good friend, Dave McGugan, was one of those guys. He was a guy that saw me and said, you have to write the book. He was a guy that after the book that came out, it said, this can touch a lot of lives. We have to do a mini series about it. I am trying to pattern myself after Dave and to be that force in the universe, a force, not the force, that can help others do the same. It's pay it forward. But how does one find faith? First, and it's so simple, but it's the absolute truth. You have to open the door in your soul and ask. Stuff happens. When you start to really seek it, even in those traumatic moments, it's whoa. Even in the moment when I lost my voice and virtually 99% of the people dumped to me, who did I turn to? I turned to music and I turned to God. And I just said, God, I know what you've given me. I know that I'm blowing it along the way. Please help show me. And all of these supernatural things started to happen too. I'm making my debut in New York after I got my voice back. Now I finally make it to Lincoln Center. And I go out to lunch with two of the singers. And the song, Frank Sinatra, New York came on. And it said, if I can make it there, I'll make it everywhere. My friend said, what if you F up there? Do you F up everywhere? And that hit me like a ton of bricks because that's the truth with New York. That's the make or break place. I went back to my apartment, sat at the piano, and then all of a sudden, all of the fear started to come back about losing my voice on the biggest stage in Italy. I'm in a full-blown panic attack. So I sit at the piano and I write this song in 3 minutes straight through. And then all of a sudden, after I'm done, there is this force of energy that just hits me, and a voice is coming to me, giving me a response to what I just wrote. And part of it was, my son, I hear your cries to heaven and I feel your pain, how I long to hold you closely and to speak your name. When it says the trials that face you, that seem to embrace you, that they're just there to humble you. So then after that song, thank God I had the recorder on, literally, not emotionally, not imagining, I am out of my body and in outer space and I cannot even see the planet. And a voice on my right-hand side, once again, a baritone voice, and I'm a tenor, says, where's the Big Apple? I cannot even see the planet. And then we start going like in a wormhole, very fast, streaming, going so fast. Where's the Big Apple? Where's the Big Apple? Over and over again. Finally, I can see the planet. Finally, the continent. Finally, the state of New York. Finally, the Big Apple. And the voice says, it's not so big, is it? Boom, back into my body. I'm struggling to take a breath. And once again, I felt like my DNA had changed. And I walked onto the stage at Lincoln Center the next day, and I felt like I owned the stage. It was so easy. I had zero fear.
What do you hope the takeaway will be for readers from Know You Know?
Couple, don't give up. You're never alone. You are never alone, even in the moment when you feel that you could be in a crowd and feel so isolated and alone. But don't trust your emotional experience to tell you that indeed you are alone. It's a feeling. Reach out. Look for help somewhere, either a friend, a counselor, God, the universe. You're never alone. And finally, after those two ingredients, never, ever give up on your passion and your dream, no matter what the world tells you.
The book is Know You Know. We believe it's going to become a miniseries, a television movie, and it's going to find its way to the big screen because the world needs to know the story of our special guest, Daniel Hendrick. Daniel, thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you, my friend. It's wonderful to talk with you. Thank you for all your help. Really appreciate it.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.